everyone, I'm Kelsey McEwen and I'm here with Teddy Wilson. Welcome to CTV Your Morning, the podcast.
Hey Kelsey, how are you? So this week, all eyes on Election Day. Canadians are just days away from heading to the polls. We'll share Anne-Marie's conversation with NDP leader Jagmeet Singh and Green Party co-leader Jonathan Pedneault with the latest from the campaign trail.
We also talked to Northwest Territories Premier R.J. Simpson. It's a great conversation all about what he's looking for from Canada's next government. Thanks so much for joining us today. And remember, you can always start your day with us live weekdays from 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern, 7 to 10 a.m. Atlantic. We're on CTV, CTV News Channel, and on your CTV News app.
So we're starting this week with another look at our relationship with our neighbors to the south. Yale University professor Jason Stanley, who studies fascism, is now moving to Canada.
Yeah, this has gained a lot of traction online. He's talked about how he's worried that the actions of U.S. President Donald Trump and his administration are pushing America closer to becoming a fascist dictatorship. Here's what he had to say on our show.
You wrote a book that was titled How Fascism Works, The Politics of Us and Them. I'm curious to know, first of all, what markers are you seeing in the United States, in your country, that indicate to you America is headed in a dangerous direction?
Well, first of all, because I am in an educational institution, what I see is the attack on history, the attack on critical inquiry. They're really attacking our institutions. They're saying schools and universities should replace critical history by mythical history, a mythical past. And then, most importantly, not just in the educational institutions, but in all of our democratic institutions, schools and universities, the federal bureaucracy, the legal system, the media. There's a pervasive culture of fear. You've got ICE agents everywhere. You've got fear of, in many institutions, from the federal bureaucracy to the schools and universities, they're demanding adherence to a state ideology that abstracts from America's complex history. They're demanding a worship of the leaders. If you criticize Trump, if you criticize the party in power, you may very well lose your job in the United States today.
If you could place the United States on a spectrum of change, from liberal democracy to a fascist dictatorship, where would you place them?
We're in the midpoint right now.
What would you call that? What's that called?
I don't know if there's a technical name for it. We're beyond the point of a backsliding democracy. I mean, look, the president of the United States is targeting law firms he doesn't like. He's targeting professors he doesn't like. He's targeting his political opponents. He's using the apparatus of the state. This is an authoritarian country now. So we've got ICE agents everywhere. If you're not a citizen of the United States, you cannot speak out on social media. Right? I mean, if my colleagues, Yale is putatively an international institution. We are one of the great universities of the world. But the federal government is saying that if you're a non-citizen student or professor at the United States, at Yale University, and you tweet on social media some criticism of the government or the state ideology, you're at risk of losing your visa. That's an authoritarian country. And this is the first step. I mean, there's an old poem about this. First, they came for the communists, and I said nothing because I was not a communist. That's what we're seeing right now. If they can do this to non-citizens, the next step is citizens.
Jason, you are a citizen, and some have described you as an academic refugee. You are coming here to work at the Munk School of Global Affairs in the city of Toronto. Are you concerned that if you leave for these reasons, that you will not be allowed back?
Ugh, that would be bad. Of course, I'm concerned, but I hope that's not true. I mean, I have family here. It's an enormous decision to leave my home, but it's a decision I'm making because there's an incredible opportunity for Canadian universities, essentially to replace the greatness of American universities. And I'm hoping Canada sees that opportunity.
I'm curious to know, what was the turning point for you? Because you have studied this, and you've studied this in relation to President Trump from his first administration, but your body of work goes beyond that. It predates that. What was the moment for you when you decided, I have to get out of here, I need to take my skills to Canada?
Yeah, well, Two reasons. First of all, I saw that the democratic institutions here are not correctly responding. Not just the universities. My own university has protected me and is doing everything it can to protect its scholars. But the universities are not collectively working together to stand up to an authoritarian regime. And when Columbia folded, that's when I accepted the job at the Monk School. But also, I really have to say, the University of Toronto, the Monk School, they have incredible plans. And academia is a meritocracy. And the best, academics like me who have the privilege and the opportunity to go to the institutions that have the brightest academic futures, like the University of Toronto today, we're going to take that opportunity.
Meanwhile, the number of Canadians traveling to the U.S. is plummeting.
Yeah, the stats around this are really interesting. Statistics Canada says the number of Canadian residents flying back from the United States is down more than 13%. So that's compared to a year ago. And according to American Customs and Border Patrol, land crossings are actually at their lowest point since the pandemic.
Yeah, so obviously there's an impact on travel there, but also interesting. We talked to Barbara Barrett, who spoke about the impact on small businesses.
So you represent dozens of independently run duty-free stores right across the country. Tell me what you are noticing in terms of a difference in the amount, even just of foot traffic.
It is, as the report said, plummeted. The report says that travelers have declined from 32% over the land border. But what that means for us in the store is a decline of anywhere from 40 to 80% down in our sales. So if I can give a little bit of context, what that means for us is we are independently owned, family-run businesses on the Canadian side of the land border that are completely dependent on that travel going over the border. We can't pivot our business anywhere else. When you go into a land border duty-free store, you have to exit into the United States.
Well, according to the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, this drop that you're talking about seeing anecdotally, and they're reporting in numbers, it started around February of this year, and we know that's when the discussions around trade war began. So we've seen reports of Canadians being delayed. They've been scrutinized. There's new warnings out today for Canadians who are crossing the border for more than 30 days. What reasons are Canadians giving you for not taking trips south of the border?
Well, unfortunately, we're not seeing a lot of Canadians in the stores. But what we are hearing is that it started as soon as the tariff threats started and the 51st state rhetoric began. The moment that happened, our sales and folks into the store just fell off the cliff. So we have that Canadian pride, which we understand. We're Canadian, we understand it. And then we have politicians, our former prime minister, current premiers, MPs telling Canadians not to travel over the Canadian border into the U.S. And then I think there's also this travel over the border anxiety. People aren't sure what's going to happen, they're afraid to go. So that's what we're hearing, that people, there's the Canadian pride, and they're afraid, and they're being told not to go.
Well, those feelings of anxiety and concern and rhetoric from politicians, when you put all that together, how does it affect your bottom line?
So we have been devastated by this. This is a crisis for our stores. Your colleague Lindsey was just speaking with the mayor in New Brunswick, who said that we should break up with the United States. We can't break up with the United States. When you go into land border duty store, you have to exit into the United States. We don't have a way to pivot. So when politicians are telling people not to travel into the U.S., they need to support us in our businesses so that we can weather this storm.
Speaking of storms, you're aware of this, I know. Starting today, Canadians planning to travel to the U.S. for more than 30 days do need to register with the U.S. Immigration, and they have to complete an alien registration requirement. And for anybody who doesn't know, that's an online form. You have to wait for approvals back before you can actually go ahead and travel. This is for more than 30 days. So, Barbara, I'm curious, adding this on top of everything else you're already dealing with, how is this likely to affect your business, and how would you like Ottawa to respond?
Any sticking point at the border is another problem for us. Again, we are 40 to 80% down. So any other thing that causes people to not cross the border adds to the crisis that we're already in. So we're calling for the government to do the things to support us, to help us weather this storm.
As we are all very busy, there's a lot going on, but have you ever stopped to think about how certain things work? Like the camera on your phone, for example. One of our producers said keys, like how do keys work? But you wind up just being more confused. Well, you're not alone. Watch this.
Things I don't understand. Number one are keys. How the hell do we all have a different key? With all the door locks in the world, it can't be a different key for every one of them. It ain't too many ways you can cut a key. It gotta be at least 10 people out there that got the same key to your house. I don't get it. Number two is daylight savings time. Who the had the authority to add an extra hour to the clock, playing with folk clocks in the middle of the night, confusing me and So in the wintertime, I feel like I'm asleep longer. In the summertime, I feel like I done overslept. Or is it the other way around? See, I don't get it. Number three are CDs. How does a thin circular disc play music? They say you're supposed to burn the music on the CD, whatever the that means. Would I light it on fire? Then the sound wave reflect off of this and that. Shut the up. How does it work? I don't get it. Number four.
There's so much not to get. She's very upset. A lot of language this morning.
That's a lot of beeping.
That is a lot of bleeping. This is a series called Things I Don't Understand, which she has put up. People also adding to her list saying they don't understand the concept of deleted pictures. Like, where do they go? Yeah. So we started asking each other, what are some of the things that you just don't get? How they work.
What don't you understand? Because you're a meteorologist. Like you understand a lot of like technical stuff. I do not. What do you not understand that's in the world where you're like, I don't know how that works?
So for me, it's off planet. I don't really get space.
Well, I don't know if anybody does.
It freaks me out a little bit to think about it. I don't really understand how time passes differently in areas with different gravity. That, like relativity, doesn't really make sense to me.
Wow.
I don't really understand what was there before we were. Like before Earth.
Deep thoughts, Kelsey.
And if I'm really tired, AKA today, if I am alone at some point in the day and my brain starts going there, it freaks me out a bit.
Yeah.
I get stressed about it.
Wow. You have really intelligent answers. I don't know how.
What are yours? What don't you understand?
I don't know how anything works. Like if
what do you mean?
I don't know how this works. Does anybody know how this works? I mean, if you asked me, I could give you some made up, answer about binary codes and ones and zeros and digital circuitry, but I'd just be making it up and I'd just be hoping the conversation would go away. I don't know how this works. I don't know how lights work. I've worked in broadcasting for over 20 years. I don't really understand how cameras work. There's a great bit by one of my favorite stand-up comics, Nate Bargatze, and his whole premise is that if he went back in time, to the 1920s, he wouldn't even be able to prove he's from the future because he doesn't know anything. He'd see somebody on an old phone and he'd be like, oh, in the future, we have these phones that do this. And they'd say, how does it work? And he'd be like, satellites? And they'd say how does a satellite work? And he's like, I couldn't even prove I'm from the future.
No, I feel like that about e-transfer.
Anything works.
I know that e-transfer works.
Yeah.
I don't know how it works. And I don't know how it works so fast.
Yeah. And you could be like, cameras are e-transfer, and you could say it's this and this. But if you really broke it down, you could never replicate it. There's a great sci-fi movie called District 9, also great commentary on refugees and post-apartheid South Africa. It's kind of a heavy movie, but it's really, really smart science fiction. And one of the ideas is that these aliens come down and we want to know how their technology works, but they're just like worker bees. They just operate the machine. They don't know how the machine works. And that's 99% of us in modern life.
Well,
it's wild.
Now that you say that, I'm earlier this week I pitched, I was like, can we do a segment on stock market? What it is, how it works. So I'm sitting here as a regular human, seeing all these fluctuations and I don't really get it. And I sat there during the segment and I was like, I'm gonna learn. And I listened the whole time and afterwards I was like, I don't get it.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. Banking doesn't really make sense to me. Where's all the money? I don't know.
I could almost explain the watch.
It's not in my bank
watch.
account. That's where the money is not.
Well, the Green Party was dealt a significant blow in its quest to regain influence in the House of Commons.
Yeah, that's right. So the party was uninvited from the federal leaders' debate by the Debate Commission. The commission says the party failed to meet participation requirements. This after it pulled 15 of its candidates from the race.
Yeah, it was kind of a last-minute decision. So we had co-party leader Jonathan Pedneault join us on the show to talk about that decision and the path forward for the party.
Jonathan, good morning. Nice to meet you. I wish this were under better circumstances, but thanks for joining us today.
Good morning.
Well, you say this decision is undemocratic, but the commission set out participation criteria, which included having an MP in the last parliament, having endorsed candidates in 90% of the ridings, and be polling over 4% in the national polls. Currently, you guys are just over 2%. Parties had to meet at least 2 of these requirements. What is undemocratic, in your opinion, about this decision?
Well, the fact that we did meet 2 of the criterias, the first one having MPs in the House of Commons, and the second one which was having nominated, not confirmed, I stress this word here, but nominated 90% candidates in 90% of the ridings throughout the country, which we also did by nominating 340 candidates. Now, between the deadline for that nomination for the commission and the deadline for the confirmation from Elections Canada, which was a week later, we faced significant challenges in the field with a lot of pushback from various parties and also citizens, difficulty collecting signatures needed by Elections Canada for confirmation. Now it appears the commission is punishing us for both doing that, but also in some few cases having candidates who decided not to run because they faced criticisms in their community that they were quote unquote splitting the vote. I think it's a very unfortunate and sad day, but once again, not very surprising because a lot of conservative and Bloc commentators pushed hard on the commission to exclude us. So this, for me, very clearly is a political decision and a sad one for democracy.
For people who are just catching up on this conversation, you have claimed that this was a coordinated effort by the Bloc Québécois and the conservative commentators. What evidence do you have to support that?
Well, the final list of candidates was public and has been public now for 10 days. It took 9 days before the commission signified to us that we were disinvited from the commission. Let's remember here that the commission did extend an invitation to us. We were planning for those debates, and at 7 a.m. yesterday morning, they in fact communicated with journalists before they communicated with us that we were going to be disinvited. Now, in that period, we saw a number of commentators from the National Post, from the Journal de Montréal, from various conservative corners and Bloc Québécois corners come very hard at us, saying that we would steal attention from the needed questioning of Mark Carney. But clearly to us, this is about Mr. Blanchet being afraid of another Quebecer on stage debating with him. And of course, while conservatives have never been strong friends or allies, it was very disappointing to see the NDP not be more supportive of another progressive voice that they clearly weren't. The Liberals were the only one, interestingly enough, even though we have many points of disagreement with them, to say that the decision was unfortunate and that they wished it hadn't been made in such a way.
This was my next question to you, is what is your next step? I imagine you are not stopping here with just saying you're disappointed.
Well, I spent 15 years of my life fighting for human rights and uplifting voices in conflict areas of various people. So I find it extremely infuriating to see a non-elected body in this country decide what the viability or so-called viability of a political party would be, especially one with seats in the House of Commons. Let's remember here that Preston Manning was allowed to participate in debates because he had one member of Parliament, and so these, this decision to me signifies very clearly the push towards once again this kind of bipartisan system that we see south of the U.S. And it's unfortunate because Canada is too diverse and too big to accommodate this sort of simple narrative. Unfortunately, we see a lot of very powerful actors in this society push in that direction. That won't prevent us from continuing to do the work. We're presenting our platform today. We're continuing to offer an opportunity for Canadians to take a real stand for social justice and environmental justice. But of course, we see it as an extremely unfortunate thing that we were denied the opportunity to speak to all Canadians yesterday and today.
Green Party co-leader Jonathan Pedneault, I want to thank you for joining us. This is the day after finding out that you will not be participating in the leaders' debates in the 2025 election. Jonathan, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
You are listening to Your Morning, the podcast, where we bring you some of our favorite conversations from our show every week. We also would love if you would join us live on CTV every weekday. You can watch us 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern, 7 to 10 a.m. Atlantic. We're on CTV, CTV News Channel, or if you're on the go, we're on the CTV News app.
While the Canada-U.S. trade war is top of mind for many voters, not all regions rely on south of the border trade. The Northwest Territories borders with other provinces, and their trade with the U.S. is less than 1%. Home to just over 40,000 people, the territory is represented in the House of Commons by one member of Parliament. Yet the Northwest Territories is on the front lines of issues that have dominated this campaign so far, from increased defense spending to resource development. As part of our election coverage, we are reaching out to every premier to hear their priorities for Canada and the next government. This morning, Northwest Territories Premier R.J. Simpson is our guest. He's joining us from Hay River. Good morning.
Good morning, Anne-Marie. Thanks for having me.
Hey, great to have you here on Your Morning. We know that boosting Canada's northern security and beefing up infrastructure have been major themes of this campaign. Just as a reminder to everybody else, here's what the parties are promising. The Liberals have pledged $6 billion for a northern threat detection system, $420 million to increase Canada's Arctic military presence. The Conservatives are committing to doubling the size of the Arctic Canadian Ranger Force for defense, along with building a new military base in Iqaluit. So I'm curious to know, Premier, what would each of these plans mean for the Northwest Territories?
Well, it's always interesting during campaigns. There's a lot of promises made, but then when things roll out, that's when you really see what's happening on the ground. So, so far, the federal government has released their revised defense strategy, and that does speak to a lot of spending in the North. But that spending is over quite a long time, over 20 years. And the numbers they're talking about aren't really going to move the needle that much in terms of the infrastructure deficit that we have here in the territory.
That's why. Go ahead, continue.
Well, that said, the federal government is investing here in the Northwest Territories. We have the Joint Task Force North Headquarters, and there's improvements to that facility right now to help support the Rangers. And then there's also improvements up in Inuvik, another forward operating location we have here in the territory. So we are seeing some investments in the North, but the military presence, when you look around the circumpolar world, we don't really have a lot of infrastructure, for the military in Canada relative to every other circumpolar nation.
Well, this is why we like to speak to the premiers, because we want to know what these big numbers announced by the federal parties actually mean to you on the ground. In order to accomplish any of these promises, we're hearing from residents that infrastructure, roads in particular, are needing improvement. And you've said that Arctic security, quote, cannot be separated from the well-being of the people who live in the North. So you've called on Canada's next government, whoever forms it, to invest in infrastructure, housing and energy projects for your territory. Not as flashy as defense or minerals, but key to people in the North.
Yeah, we often talk about Arctic security and sovereignty. And Arctic security, that's a lot of the hard infrastructure, the military infrastructure. Sovereignty, though, is asserting your sovereignty over land. And the way that Canada does that is by inhabiting that land. And that's done by the people of the Northwest Territories, the Inuit, the First Nations, and the Métis. And so we're up here asserting that sovereignty. And, we're still doing that with, I would say, frontier infrastructure, the type of infrastructure that was built 60, 70 years ago. We haven't seen the major types of nation-building investment that will help Canada assert sovereignty. We don't have a highway connecting the southern part of the territory to the northern part of the territory. Simple things like that. We're just talking about roads. We have a number of stranded power grids. We're not connected to the North American energy grid. So there's a number of these things that I think maybe people in the South, the provinces, take for granted, that this infrastructure is in place and has been in place, and we just don't have that yet.
This is why it's great to have these conversations, Premier, because you do remind us that it is different when you're in the territory, and the concerns and the needs are different as well. Former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau tied Trump's 51st state talk directly to the U.S. president's interest in our critical minerals. And the Northwest Territories has a vast amount, 23 critical minerals that include lithium, rare earth elements. And you've said that developing these minerals is critical also in defending Canada's Arctic sovereignty. How then can we leverage those opportunities, and what do you want to see the government do?
Yeah, the resources that we have in the Northwest Territories, they're important for Canada's security, for Canada's sovereignty, and for the security and sovereignty of our allies as well. And so there's a lot of untapped potential in the Northwest Territories. To access that, we need the infrastructure, we need roads to actually get to these locations where these resources are. And we need partnership with the federal government. We have a different system in the Northwest Territories when it comes to managing our resources. It's a co-management system, and there's authorities that lie with the territorial government, with Indigenous governments, and with the federal government. And so unless we are all partnering and moving together in the same direction, it's going to be difficult to really take advantage of those resources for the benefit of Northerners and for the benefit of Canada. So what I want to see from a federal government is a government that is interested in the North, for one thing. We only have one member of parliament, as you mentioned, and so it can be difficult to get their attention. I want a federal government that takes time to understand the North, the realities of the North, and a government that's willing to partner with us so that we can advance our economy and support Canada's economy and security.
Well, on your first point, in terms of having their attention, I feel like you've got it now. Everybody's looking north, including President Trump, who has repeatedly said that the U.S. should annex Greenland for national and economic reasons. And after meeting with officials from Greenland and Denmark in February, which you did, you spoke about the importance of those relationships, in particular because the thought seems to be with Canada's North and Greenland, there is this potential trade route that would really shorten time than the traditional trade routes we have there now. So what does that look like for the Northwest Territories, given Trump's threats to both annex Greenland and Canada?
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about that here in the North. Obviously, we've never seen this kind of attention focused on the North, and that it is because it's strategic in terms of the security of North America, and strategic because of the resources, as you mentioned. We have so many untapped resources here. I'm sure there's resources we don't even know about because this area is so vast. And so, like I said, to capitalize on that, we need to see some investment and some partnership from the federal government. And I think that would go a long way to addressing the concerns that many Americans have. When I went down to the United States, when my colleagues have gone down there, we have a lot of allies, in Senate, in the Congress, and just in the general American public. So there's not necessarily the type of support for the tariffs, but there is there's a desire for Canada to do more in the Arctic. That's the message I got from the Americans, is that, like I said earlier, you look at the circumpolar world, there's not a lot of infrastructure, military infrastructure in northern Canada. And if there is an attack on North America, we're not going to see tanks coming through the Arctic. But if missiles come over, they're coming over the Arctic.
So that's the conversation that's happening now. Premier, fascinating. Listen, the Northwest Territories, you mentioned they have one seat. They'll soon have a new MP. Michael McLeod is not running for re-election after being the territory's Liberal MP since 2015. We should mention, previous to that, this seat was held by someone from the NDP. There has not been a Conservative MP there since the 70s, late 70s, 79, I think. What party do you believe is best going to address the needs of the Northwest Territories, given what you've heard so far on the campaign trail?
Well, in the Northwest Territories, we don't have a party system. We have a consensus government system. So we all run as independents. So we don't have any party affiliation, which really gives us the flexibility to work with whoever is in Ottawa. What's good for the territory, it's usually what's good for Canada. And so we don't have to tailor our message to a Liberal or a Conservative or an NDP government. We just need to bring forward our concerns. And so, like you said, all the parties are talking about the North now. Talking about investments in the North, infrastructure investments. So it's just a matter of ensuring that whoever gets into power, that we hold them to account for those promises that they've made.
My two takeaways from our conversation, Premier, one is a way to demonstrate sovereignty is to actually improve the lives of the people who live there, who, as you rightly say, are exercising sovereignty in our North every day. And two, shame on us that it took the U.S. looking north for us to also do the same. But good to see that there's promises coming.
So, as I'm sure you know, we are now just days away from the Canadian federal election, and it's really turning into an upward struggle for the New Democrats.
Yeah, the poll numbers have not been great. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says, despite that, he's confident he will hold onto his seat, and he's making a pretty blatant call to Canadians to give his party enough votes so that the NDP can maintain some degree of influence in Parliament.
Yeah, and Anne-Marie had a chance to sit down with Jagmeet Singh, and it's important to note we did have requests out for all the party leaders, but Singh and Green Party co-leader Jonathan Pedneault, who's interview we aired earlier in this episode were the only ones who agreed to join us.
Why do you believe that you're losing support?
Well, one of the things is that I feel polling doesn't really accurately capture New Democrats. Very recently, just a couple months ago, Margaret Stiles and the New Democrats in Ontario were told they were not going to win their own seats, nor were they going to win party status, and they won official opposition. So I think maybe folks have a harder time gauging New Democrat support. But what we do know is this election is important, and all the things that we're proud of as a country in this turmoil with the United States and the fight against Donald Trump, all the things that we're proud of as Canadians happened because people voted for New Democrats, sent us to Ottawa, and we were able to bring in universal health care under Tommy Douglas and old age security and pensions. So all the things that Canadians are very proud of happened because they voted New Democrat. And so people have the power to vote for us again, and we can continue the work we did with dental care and pharmacare and workers' protection. So folks that in this time say, who's going to really stand up for me and my family? New Democrats will do that.
Okay, this is what I wanted to ask you about. You have made historic moves for the NDP. You have brought things forward that the late, great Jack Layton could only dream of. This didn't happen under Tom Mulcair. You brought in dental care. You brought in pharmacare. Why is that not translating into support for the NDP? Why are people going Conservative and Liberal?
Well, I don't take anything for granted. So just because I was able to fight for people, I don't expect that that translates to people voting for me. But I do think that in an election, I can say, I know that people are hurting and they can't afford to buy their home or they can't afford to pay their groceries. And so when I promise that I'm going to find ways to bring down the price of groceries or find ways to make homes more affordable, trust me when I say it, because I delivered the biggest expansion of healthcare. Trust me, if you're in Toronto and you want something that's going to help bring down the prices, send me to Ottawa, send my team to Ottawa, and we'll do it.
Right, and I know that you say that this is about, it's not about numbers, but it is about numbers in an election race, right? Like if you're trying to say to Canadians, look what I can do for you, and you've shown them what you can do for them, and they're still not putting their support behind the NDP, why is that? Is it a Donald Trump factor? Is it a Mark Carney factor? Well,
I think there's a lot of things going on. People are certainly worried about Donald Trump, and it's really changed the kind of people's priorities a lot, and people are really worried and afraid of what it means.
But they're still worried about the same things. Cost of living, who's going to lead, housing, who's going to take care of me if I lose my job, like we're seeing in the auto industry.
Yeah, I think Donald Trump has upset a lot of things, like turned things on their head, and people are in a new way more worried than ever about the threats of Donald Trump on Canada. We saw a lot of folks talking about elbows up and fighting back and defending our country. In all of that, I want folks to know, if you want someone that's going to fight for you, not for the CEOs or the billionaires, Mark Carney sadly has shown that he profited off of the housing market. When he was in Brookfield Investments, he and his company said, well, there's lots of buildings where people are paying affordable rent. Let's target those buildings, buy those up, and jack up the rents. I don't think that's someone who's going to actually fix the housing crisis when him and his company benefited off of the housing crisis. And then we saw that he's engaged in a lot of tax avoidance. Brookfield Investments, under his time as the chair of the board, which is a very powerful position, was one of the biggest tax dodgers in our country. And so I'm worried that that's not someone that's going to then close tax loopholes or offshore tax havens. When asked about it, he said, I'm going to cut spending, and wouldn't actually answer the question on whether he would close tax loopholes. And we know that that starves our system of the funding we need for doctors, nurses, frontline healthcare workers.
You used to tell me, and you and I, this is our third election campaign where we have interacted. You used to tell me, Anne-Marie, it doesn't matter, I'm running to be Prime Minister. That message has changed. You have shifted. You're no longer asking Canadians to vote for you to Prime Minister. You're asking them to be the balance of power in a minority government. So there's two scenarios then. A minority Liberal government where we've got NDP support, which sounds a lot like what we had before this election was called, or a Conservative minority. And then how will you work with the Conservatives to move ahead things like national pharmacare? Well,
this is an important question. So for anyone that's wondering where I stand on the Conservatives, I can say very unequivocally, very clearly, New Democrats and myself as leader would never support Pierre Poilievre as Prime Minister, would never support the Conservatives. Their values are the opposite of what we want. They want to cut health care.
So you will not work with them, even if they're the government?
Yeah, it's clear that their priorities are to cut pensions, to cut health care. These are their plans. Like Pierre Poilievre has laid this out. He wants to cut dental care, cut pharmacare. He said it very clearly many times. And so that's not someone I want to work with.
Okay, but then following that logic down the road, why not do what Tom Mulcair had mentioned to Canadian voters, which is put as much support behind the Liberals in order to stop the Conservatives? Well,
we've seen that the Liberals aren't going to do the things that you need. Like, if you look at our history...
They are if you support them.
No, they're not going to do the things that you need unless we're there, unless New Democrats are there. Liberals promised pharmacare for 3 decades. Didn't do it until we forced them. They said no to dental care. They said it could never happen. I remember once being in a meeting when we got them to agree to it, and they said it's going to take 7 years to implement. I'm like, no, not 7 years. We got to get it done immediately, and we got it done. And so if you want someone that's going to be there to push for things that people need, like putting a price cap on grocery essentials, or banning big corporations from buying up affordable homes. We're the ones that are going to do those things because we've got the convictions of fighting for people. And if you send us to Ottawa, if you vote for us, that's the only way we achieve these things.
What if voters don't send you to Ottawa? Right now, the latest seat projections, Nick Nanos has you at 3 seat projections. The highest I've seen is 5. So you're sitting anywhere 3 to 5. And a reminder to people at home, official party status is 12. If Canadians don't send you to Ottawa with official party status, will you stay on as leader?
Well, I'm not focused on that. I'm focused on the election in front of me. Obviously, I'm going to focus on the next 2 weeks and making the case to Canadians that if you want the things that we fought for, if you want someone that's going to fight for you, you have the power to vote for New Democrats and send us to Ottawa. Voting for New Democrats is how we got in dental care. Like, I'm the one as a leader that did it, but I couldn't have done it but for the fact people sent 25 of us, voted for us, and sent us to Ottawa. If they want those things to happen, people can vote for us and we'll do more.
What are your markers for success at the end of this 2 weeks?
I just want to win as many seats as possible so we've got a position where we can get things done for people. That's what I've shown. I've shown that when I have power and when my team has power, throughout our history, New Democrats use our power for people. We bring in things like healthcare. We brought in dental care and pharmacare. I want to use my power to get people what they need.
Are you the right person to continue leading this party?
Yes.
Are you the right person to continue leading this party if they don't hold party status?
I'm the right person to lead this party. Right now we're in an election and I'm focused on the election in front of me.
Okay, that's it for the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Really glad you did. And hey, if you want more of these great conversations, don't forget to download or hit subscribe to Your Morning the Podcast, available on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you think the podcast is great, you'll love the show. We are live weekday mornings on CTV, CTV News Channel, or on the CTV News app. Start your morning with us.